My name is Elena Vasquez, and I'm about to tell you about the day everything changed at Forward Operating Base Crimson. The day when my great-grandfather's 1903 Springfield rifle, the one they all mocked, proved that sometimes the oldest tools are the most reliable. I should start by saying I never wanted to be here. Afghanistan wasn't on my life plan when I graduated from Colorado State with a degree in mechanical engineering. But student loans don't pay themselves, and the Army offered a path forward that my small-town upbringing had never provided. What I didn't expect was to become the laughingstock of my entire unit because of a rifle that's older than my grandmother. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mockery started the moment I unpacked it from my gear bag 3 months ago. While everyone else carried their sleek M4 carbines with all the latest tactical attachments, red dot sights, forward grips, laser designators, I pulled out what looked like a museum piece. The 1903 Springfield, with its worn wooden stock and simple iron sights, seemed to belong in a history book rather than a modern battlefield. "Jesus Vasquez," laughed Sergeant Rodriguez, a compact man from Texas who never missed an opportunity to assert his authority. "Did you raid your great-great-grandfather's closet? That thing belongs in the Smithsonian, not a combat zone." The entire barracks erupted in laughter. Even Corporal Jenkins, usually the quiet type, couldn't suppress a chuckle. "Seriously, Elena, they've got modern weapons in the armory. You don't have to bring your own antiques." What they didn't understand, what I couldn't explain without sounding sentimental, was that this rifle represented 4 generations of military service in my family. My great-grandfather, Miguel Vasquez, had carried it through the trenches of World War I. My grandfather used it in World War II, despite having access to more modern weapons. My father brought it to Vietnam, where it saved his life more than once. And now it was my turn. The rifle wasn't just functional. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship from an era when weapons were built to last centuries, not just until the next military contract. The action was smoother than silk, the barrel true as a laser, and the trigger broke clean as a glass rod. But try explaining that to a bunch of 20-somethings who thought newer automatically meant better. "I bet it doesn't even fire," taunted Private Morrison, a kid from Detroit who joined up after his factory job disappeared. "Probably just for show, right? Like those fake swords people hang over their fireplaces." I wanted to respond, but I'd learned early in my military career that proving yourself through actions carried more weight than defending yourself with words. Besides, I had something to prove, not just to them, but to myself. Could I honor my family's legacy while serving my country with the same rifle that had protected 3 previous generations? The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Our forward operating base sat in the valley surrounded by jagged mountains, a strategic position that controlled 3 major supply routes. Intel had been reporting increased Taliban activity in the Vaiko area, but nothing concrete enough to warrant a full operation. That changed on a Tuesday morning when our long-range reconnaissance team failed to check in. Captain Williams, a no-nonsense officer from West Point who'd earned his reputation in 3 previous deployments, called an emergency briefing. The ops room, usually filled with casual banter, fell silent as he spread a topographical map across the central table. "Team Bravo went dark at 0600 hours, he announced, his finger tracing their planned route along a ridgeline approximately 2 miles northeast of our position. Last communication indicated they were establishing an observation post on Hill 394 to monitor suspected insurgent movement. The silence deepened. Everyone knew that radio silence in hostile territory usually meant one of 2 things: equipment failure or contact with the enemy. Given the recent intelligence reports, we all suspected the latter. "We're mounting a rescue operation," Captain Williams continued. "Alpha Team will approach from the south, Charlie Team from the west. Bravo Team's mission was critical. They were tracking a high-value target believed to be coordinating attacks on civilian convoys. As he outlined the mission parameters, I noticed something troubling on the map. The approach routes he designated would put both teams in exposed positions with limited cover. Hill 394 dominated the surrounding terrain, meaning anyone holding the high ground could observe and engage our forces long before we could effectively return fire. I raised my hand, earning surprised looks from several team members who were used to my generally quiet demeanor during briefings. "Yes, Vasquez," Captain Williams acknowledged. "Sir, with respect, both approach routes cross open ground within effective rifle range of the hill. If hostile forces have taken the observation post, they'll have clear fields of fire on our teams." Rodriguez rolled his eyes dramatically. "Here we go with the World War I tactics. This isn't trench warfare, Vasquez. We've got body armor, air support, and superior firepower." "Sergeant Rodriguez makes a valid point," Captain Williams said, though his tone suggested he was considering my observation. "Our equipment and training are designed for these scenarios." I studied the map more carefully, my engineering background helping me visualize the geometry of the situation. "Sir, Hill 394 is approximately 1,200 meters from the nearest cover for Alpha Team's approach, and 900 meters for Charlie Team. That's well within the engagement range for any competent marksman with a scoped rifle." "And what do you suggest?" the captain asked, his question carrying a hint of genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. "Overwatch," I replied immediately. "Someone needs to provide covering fire from a position that can engage the hilltop before our teams enter the kill zone." Private Morrison snorted. "Let me guess, you want to set up with that antique rifle and play sniper. This isn't a Western movie, Vasquez." The comment drew chuckles from several team members, but Captain Williams raised his hand for silence. His expression suggested he was working through tactical calculations that went beyond the social dynamics of the briefing room. "The nearest position with line of sight to Hill 394 is Ridge 312, he said, consulting the map. "That's a 1,800-meter shot across a valley with variable wind conditions. Extreme range for most weapon systems. Not for a 1903 Springfield with proper ammunition," I said quietly. "That rifle was designed for long-range precision shooting. It's been making shots at that distance for over a century." The room fell silent. Even Rodriguez looked uncertain, perhaps recognizing that this conversation had moved beyond casual mockery into serious tactical planning. Captain Williams studied the map for several long moments, his finger tracing sight lines and calculating angles. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Vasquez, are you telling me you can guarantee a precision shot at 1,800 meters with that rifle?" "I can't guarantee anything in combat, sir," I replied honestly. "But I can put rounds on target at that range. My family has been doing it with this rifle for 4 generations." "This is insane," Rodriguez muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're going to base a rescue operation on a century-old rifle and family stories?" Captain Williams continued studying the map, weighing options that could mean the difference between a successful rescue and additional casualties. The room remained silent, everyone understanding that we'd moved past the point of casual skepticism into life-and-death decision-making. "Here's what we're going to do," he finally announced. "Vasquez will establish overwatch on Ridge 312, Alpha, and Charlie teams will hold position until she confirms the hilltop is clear or neutralizes any threats. If her vintage equipment proves inadequate, we'll call in air support and approach after the area is secured." The plan meant everything was riding on me and a rifle my teammates considered obsolete. No pressure at all. 2 hours later, I was belly down on Ridge 312 with my great-grandfather's Springfield, watching Hill 394 through a pair of military-grade binoculars. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley, and a steady breeze from the southwest would affect trajectory calculations for any long-range shot. Through my radio headset, I could hear Alpha and Charlie teams moving into position, their voices tense but professional. Captain Williams had established a command post with clear communications to all elements, and I knew that multiple sets of eyes were watching my position through various optical devices. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Leader," came Rodriguez's voice. Through the radio, "Do you have eyes on the target area?" I swept the hillside methodically with my binoculars, looking for any sign of movement or defensive positions. The terrain was rocky with sparse vegetation, providing numerous hiding spots. For enemy personnel, Alpha Leader, Overwatch. Negative movement on primary target area, continuing surveillance. What I didn't say over the radio was that my hands were sweating despite the cool mountain air. Everything I'd claimed about the rifle's capabilities was true. I'd been shooting it since I was 12 years old, and I could consistently hit targets. At 1,000 meters on a calm day at a familiar range. But combat conditions were different. Variable wind, unfamiliar terrain, and human lives depending on precision added layers of complexity that no amount of target practice could fully replicate. Then I saw them dot movement in a cluster of rocks. Approximately 50 meters below the hilltop caught my attention. Through the binoculars, I could make out what appeared to be a fighting position with at least 2 individuals, one of whom was clearly equipped with a scoped rifle. "All stations, Overwatch. I have eyes on 2 hostile personnel in defensive positions. On Hill 394, one appears to be equipped with a precision rifle, range approximately 1,850 meters from my position." "Copy, Overwatch," came Captain Williams' voice. "Can you engage?" I settled behind the Springfield, adjusting my position until the rifle felt like a natural extension of my body. The iron sights, unchanged since 1903, aligned perfectly as I'd been taught by 3 generations of family marksmen. But iron sights at nearly 2,000 meters would require shooting skills that went beyond normal military training. "Overwatch, Alpha Leader. We're in position but exposed if those guys start shooting. Need to know if you can take the shot." The weight of the moment settled on me like a physical force. Not just the tactical situation, but months of mockery and skepticism from my teammates. This was more than a rescue mission. It was vindication for every family story they'd dismissed, every claim about the rifle's capabilities they'd laughed at. I controlled my breathing, feeling my heartbeat slow as I entered the focused state. My father had taught me during countless hunting trips in the Colorado mountains. The rifle, worn smooth by generations of hands, felt familiar and reassuring. Wind estimation was critical. I watched grass and small bushes in the valley below, noting how they moved in the breeze. The wind was steady from the southwest at approximately 8 to 10 miles per hour, which would push the bullet to the right and slightly down over the distance involved. "Taking the shot," I announced over the radio, my voice steadier than I felt. I made the calculations automatically, windage adjustments, elevation corrections for the extreme range, the slight upward angle to the target. The 1903 Springfield had been designed for exactly this type of precision shooting, and the match-grade ammunition I'd loaded specifically for this deployment would perform flawlessly if I did my part. The trigger broke cleanly, just as it had for over a century. The rifle's recoil, substantial but manageable, pushed back against my shoulder as the shot echoed across the valley. Through the binoculars, I watched the impact. The first hostile personnel dropped immediately, the precision of the shot eliminating the primary threat. The second individual, apparently realizing they were under fire from an unexpected direction, abandoned their position and began moving down the reverse slope of the hill. "Direct hit on primary target," I reported over the radio. "Secondary target is withdrawing down the reverse slope." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Rodriguez's voice came through the headset, and for the first time since I'd known him, he sounded genuinely impressed. "Holy shit, Vasquez. I can barely see that hillside with my scope, and you just made a precision shot with iron sights. How the hell did you do that?" "Same way my great-grandfather did it at Belowwood," I replied, allowing myself a small smile as I chambered another round. Proper fundamentals and a rifle that was built to last. The rescue operation proceeded flawlessly. Alpha and Charlie. Teams reached Hill 394 without taking fire, and within an hour they'd recovered Team Bravo, who had been pinned down by the same sniper position I'd eliminated. 2 of our guys had minor injuries, but everyone was walking out under their own power. As we regrouped back at the FABE, the atmosphere had changed completely. The same soldiers who'd mocked my antique rifle were now asking detailed questions about its capabilities, its history, and the marksmanship techniques I'd learned from my family. "I owe you an apology," Rodriguez said as we cleaned weapons in the armory. "I've been shooting for 15 years, and I wouldn't attempt that shot with the best modern rifle in our inventory. The fact that you made it with iron sights, that's something special." Captain Williams approached as I was field stripping the Springfield for cleaning. "Vasquez, I've been in the Army for 12 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Mind if I ask where you learned to shoot at that level?" "4 generations of family tradition, sir," I replied, running a cleaning rod through the century-old barrel. "This rifle has been making shots like that since 1917. It just needed someone who understood its capabilities." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm putting you in for a commendation. That shot probably saved American lives today. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Private Morrison, the kid who'd been most vocal about doubting the rifle's functionality, approached me during evening chow. "Hey, Vasquez," he said quietly, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. "I wanted to apologize for all the stuff I said about your rifle. I was wrong, and I acted like an ass." "Don't worry about it," I replied. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion." "No, it's more than that," he continued. "My grandfather served in World War II, and he always talked about the importance of respecting the weapons and the people who came before us. I forgot that lesson, and I'm sorry." That evening, as I cleaned and oiled the Springfield by the light of a field lamp, I thought about the day's events. The rifle that had seemed so out of place in a modern military environment had proven itself once again, just as it had for my great-grandfather in France, my grandfather in the Pacific, and my father in Vietnam. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself. I could honor my family's legacy while serving my country, and the skills passed down through generations were still relevant in a high-tech world. The mockery had stung, but it had also motivated me to excel in ways I might not have otherwise. 3 days later, word came down that the high-value target Team Bravo had been tracking a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks on civilian convoys had been captured during a follow-up operation. The intelligence gathered from the position I'd neutralized had been instrumental in locating his hideout. As I packed the Springfield for our return to the States the following month, I realized that this deployment had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I'd arrived as a young engineer trying to pay off student loans, and had found a deeper connection to my family's military heritage than I'd ever expected. The rifle went back into its case, ready to serve another generation if needed. But more importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the old ways aren't obsolete, they're proven. And sometimes the quietest weapons make the loudest statements. My teammates never mocked the Springfield again. In fact, several of them asked if I could teach them the marksmanship fundamentals I'd learned from my family. Rodriguez even asked if he could examine the rifle, handling it with the respect due to a weapon that had served faithfully for over a century. "This thing is built like a tank," he said, working the bolt action and feeling its smooth precision. They don't make them like this anymore. No, I agreed. They don't. But that's exactly why it's still here, still working, still protecting American soldiers after all these years. As our convoy prepared to leave Phobe Crimson for the last time, I looked back at the mountains where I'd made the shot that changed everything. Somewhere out there, Ridge 312 and Hill 394 would continue their silent watch over the valley, but they'd always hold a special significance for me. I'd proven that heritage and tradition still had a place in modern warfare, that the wisdom of previous generations could complement contemporary tactics, and that sometimes the most effective solution is the one that's been working all along. My great-grandfather's Springfield had silenced more than just an enemy sniper that day. It had silenced every doubt about its capabilities, every mockery of its age, and every question about whether old-school marksmanship still mattered in a high-tech world. The answer, delivered at 1,850 meters with iron sights and a century of proven service, was a resounding yes. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.